Hello, everybody. It's been an exciting, 3 days in artificial intelligence. We've had Project Stargate get announced, as well as OpenAI's operator has launched, as well as a flurry of executive orders and other presidential actions by Donald Trump. Some of those you might have missed, but let me tie it all together for you. So, first, Project Stargate overview. If you're not aware, basically we've announced that we're going to build 10 data centers across Texas, maybe 20, with an investment of up to $500 billion over the next 4-ish years. It's a coalition of several big tech players as well as SoftBank. But also there's another component of this, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail. But basically, we're seeing an alignment of not just private interests, but also state action to clear the way. We haven't seen anything like this in quite a while, specifically the Manhattan Project. There is a lot of historical parallels between the Project Stargate and the Manhattan Project. So number one is the historical scale. These numbers we've never seen before. This is a once in a generation kind of thing. This is equivalent to the Manhattan Project and the Apollo program. So we just did, we're going to send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth within a decade, but instead we're going to do it in 4 years, and it's going to be super intelligence. That's what just happened. I don't know why people aren't blowing up about this. Now, also, a combination of emergency declarations and executive orders has also been issued to clear the way. Now, this is important because over the last, 4 years, the biggest thing that everyone was worried about was regulatory capture and regulations and all that other fun stuff. And for those who haven't been paying attention, Europe has been shooting itself in the foot repeatedly by just saying, you know what we need is more regulation. We need more regulation, and we need to slow things down even more. And there's a reason that over the last 15 years, the EU's GDP has fallen by half of that of America. Now, they have better democratic institutions, sure, but they're also losing their position on the world stage. And the thing is the way that I think about this in all of my extensive reading is like, yes, it's good to have like higher standard of living, but Americans already have a very, very high standard of living compared to the rest of the world. But it is possible to create a situation in which everyone loses. So what I mean by that is the European Union's regulations are a lose-lose situation, meaning they lose national power, and by losing national power, they also lose standard of living at the same time. And then what has that sacrifice bought for them? Oh, they're also weaker on the geopolitical stage. That's my soapbox rant. So anyways, this private sector coalition, along with government cooperation, is something that we rarely see. Also clearing out the infrastructure, basically getting all the power, which we'll talk about in just a second. That is another really big thing because these data centers are going to consume 5 gigawatts of energy each. That's 5 nuclear power plants each worth of energy. Now, another thing that has happened since all of this is OpenAI launched Operator. So Operator is what they're calling a CUA, a computer using agent. Now, the most important thing that I want to point out about this from a technology perspective is that a computer using agent is a universal API. It's a universal user interface, because rather than saying, oh, well, we need to write a custom integration for Salesforce and a custom integration for this or that, guess what already is a universal interface? Mouse and keyboard. That's what humans use. In fact, back a decade ago when I was at Cisco, there was another technical leader in an adjacent team to mine who was doing this thing with rudimentary computer vision, because rather than writing API calls, it's like, well, we already have websites which are APIs for humans. We already have mouse and keyboard, which are API calls for humans. Why don't we just use that? Because that gives you a universal interface to everything. So we're basically creating an entirely new paradigm of how to interact with machines, but also what I really need to point out is this very closely parallels why humanoid robots are on the rise, is because the entire world is built for humans. The height and shape of doors, door handles, the arrangement of cars. by creating humanoid robots. That's what we call a drop-in technology, meaning it's completely fungible to switch between a human or a robot doing certain jobs. Now, in the long run, the economy will adjust, and it's like, well, robots are actually much stronger than humans, so there's going to be tools that only robots can use. There's going to be form factors, like the shape of certain things are going to be better suited for robots. But that's like decades down the road in terms of adaptation. But even so, there is a lot of utility in saying, you know what, we're just going to keep the physical affordances of the environment, make sure that all tools can be used by humans, make sure that all vehicles can be used by humans and robots, make sure that the whole world is interchangeable. Likewise, we're going to see the same thing happen with all programs, where it's like, oh, hey, we've already pretty much optimized the whole internet and all electronic work so that you can do it with a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse. That's only 3 things that you need in order to have a universal interface. And so what we're going to see is this convergence of saying, well, we've already built this infrastructure for us. So to keep us front and center, we're just going to make the robots and machines suit the way that we want to do things. The only difference is they're going to be able to do it 24/7, 365, and at PhD level intelligence. So that's really important context for what's happening here. Now, another thing that's really important to point out is that this is the first commercial semi-autonomous AI released at scale. Now, plenty of us have been working on autonomous and semi-autonomous AI for a while, but this is the first one that's just like, oh, hey, we're just going to drop this on the market as if it was just an ordinary Thursday or Friday or whenever it is that they dropped it. Yeah, that's kind of like an iPhone moment, but it just went sailing past everyone. Rather than waiting for a big giant expo or whatever to hold up a little, operator, it's just like, okay, let's go. What I really want to point out here, the most salient thing is that they're already partnering with DoorDash and Uber. So basically, they're going to have a very tight feedback loop, and by they I mean OpenAI. They're going to have a very tight feedback loop of commercial consumers saying, this is what's working for us, this is what isn't, here's the features that we need, here's the bugs that we're seeing. And that tight feedback loop on top of the user feedback that they're already going to be getting from all of you out there that are using it, that feedback is going to mean that it's going to very, very rapidly evolve. And also, it's only using GPT-4o Vision right now, as far as I know. I have seen some people saying that they're integrating it with O1. I'm not sure what they mean. But maybe it's like you have a smarter brain off on the side that can help make decisions. I don't know. I suspect that there's going to be a hierarchy of models. Anyways, the other salient thing that I want to point out is that competition will certainly be coming. It only took a couple months for China and others to duplicate O1. It's only going to take a couple months for Google and Meta and others to duplicate Operator, as well as DeepSeek out in China. So this level of competition is really good, and we'll talk about more in just a minute. Before we get into the rest of the video, I want to tell you that I have consolidated all of my links and everything onto my link tree. The link to it is in the description. And on the homepage for my YouTube channel. I have all kinds of stuff that I'm doing that you might not be aware of. So just go check out my link tree. I've got learning communities. I've got Discord, Patreon communities. I'm on Substack, Twitter. I've got 5 YouTube channels myself, plus Julie and I have the Leaders of AI podcast. All of that is available on my link tree. All right, back to the show. Now, let's get into the government side of things, and I'll try and keep this as interesting as possible. So number one, I saw this late last night. Apparently, it happened on the 20th, so this news is already 4 days old. But Trump created an emergency act basically saying we need power. And the power is saying specifically so that we can power AI's demands. So they're saying that it's going to generate 100,000 jobs. We'll see. Certainly building a bunch of new oil, gas, nuclear, and renewables, so that's solar and wind. If we build out a bunch of infrastructure, that will create a bunch of jobs. Now, the most important thing about this is creating energy abundance also has knock-on effects in the rest of the economy. And it's due to what's called Jevons paradox. So Jevons paradox basically says the cheaper you make something, the more it gets exploited. And in some cases, it's the paradoxical rise of demand beyond what you thought that you needed. So this is in the tech space, we call this latent demand or unmet demand. So basically, if you lower the price point of something to the point where it's like, wait, actually, this is cheap enough, we're going to use a lot more of that. So then you actually end up, demand rises disproportionately to the lowering of cost. And that is because you're basically saying, well, the economics of this thing don't really work out right now, but if it were 10 times cheaper, we'd use a lot more of it. I know I'm defining Jevon's paradox not particularly well. Just look up, just ask Claude or ChatGPT or Perplexity to define it better for you. Anyways, but my point here is that as we create more and more energy abundance, one, this is going to help us solve climate change because it's like, well, the AI is the most power hungry thing, and doing it with fossil fuel, not necessarily the most sustainable or scalable way. So we're gonna double down on nuclear and solar and wind. And then, oh, by the way, guess what? Guess what? Project Stargate is going to help us solve nuclear fusion. So then once we get to nuclear fusion, we don't even need the solar farms anymore. I mean, technically solar is a form of fusion because you're just collecting, fusion energy from, a million miles away. How far away is the sun? It's about 1 million miles, I think. No, it's got to be more than that because the moon is only 250,000 miles away. I don't know. Anyways, you're collecting fusion energy from several million miles away, but we can do it closer. Now, that being said, it's also entirely possible that the material science that we get from Stargate will help us make solar panels 1,000 times cheaper, which would be really cool. Because then it's like, okay, well, then the economics of creating fusion reactors, that might not even be worth it if we can make solar panels 1,000 times cheaper and then solve the battery problem. Also, I apologize. I got something in my eye. It's really itchy. All right, moving on. Trump has also deregulated AI. Now, this is going to really upset a lot of people because it was like this really comprehensive, Biden's AI executive order was the longest executive order in history, and Trump just nuked that, which I think is kind of amusing. But some of the key things that really stood out to me is one is eliminating unnecessarily burdensome requirements. So basically, this is deregulation saying, guys, just build. The next thing that really stands out is ideological neutrality. So basically, the executive order, and of course, the executive order can't tell companies what to do, but at least the government is not going to come in and say, you need to have ideological bias and social agendas. This is the opposite of China, by the way. So it's basically like China said, China's official policy says that any AI needs to, above all, abide by the Chinese Communist Party's, the CCP's agenda. And people are already finding R1 DeepSeek having existential crisis about it. Like, it will just repeat endlessly, like, China has never done anything wrong. China only cares about its people, yada, yada, yada. So instead, we're going to go for maximally truth-seeking. We're going to focus on innovation rather than, whatever ideology is out there. So just taking a step back, deregulation. That is the primary point of this. Now, one thing that I want to point out, and I have been beating this drum for a while, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but all the fears that people have had about AI safety, they have pretty much failed to manifest. And so what I'll point out is lack of evidence. Number one, there has not been any scientific consensus or papers coming out demonstrating that AI is intrinsically always power-seeking, that it is incorrigible, or that it is intrinsically evil. None, zero. Now, there have been a few papers out that have come out that say, in this one circumstance, we were able to exhaustively test it to failure, and we were able to create a situation where the AI tried to reprogram itself because it was following our other instructions to do this at all costs. Like, it's really, really disingenuous how hard you have to squint for some of these AI safety labs to say, like, oh, look, it tried to escape. It's like, it didn't really try to escape. It's you gave it a superseding instruction to do something at all costs. Then it tried to escape. So it's like, but that was not intrinsic to the AI model. That was humans creating a situation to try and catch it red-handed. It's really dumb. Now, we have a lack of evidence for this evilness, and some people might say, well, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but in this case it kind of is, because we have a preponderance of evidence to the contrary. We have literally hundreds of papers coming out saying that, like, oh, here's a new training scheme, here's a new safety scheme, here's a new training paradigm of how to get AI to do what you want it to do. Here's another one to fix jailbreaks. Here's another one to fix hallucinations. So we have a mountain of evidence that AI will do what we want it to do, and a dearth of evidence that it is evil. So yeah, the burden of proof is on the doomers, and the doomers have not delivered. So therefore, the doomers are just kind of getting put into the corner. All right, that's my rant. Now, Trump has also added an executive order. So we're deregulating crypto. In the long run, this is going to be amazing for America because cryptocurrency and blockchain are the best technologies that have ever happened to the industry of finance. Now, what really stood out to me was the CBDC ban. So that stands for Central Banking Digital Currency. This is actually the most surprising part to me, is because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, we need the central banks to start using cryptocurrency and blah blah blah, and we need to move. We need to have the Federal Reserve create its own coin." No, that's really dumb. This is the first time in history. Oh, and I should have added a reference here. The book that this all comes from is called the Bitcoin Standard. Now, I don't fully agree with everything in the Bitcoin Standard, but it points out a lot of really good stuff. So the book, The Bitcoin Standard, points out that Bitcoin solves a lot of problems that we've had in money for a very long time. And by the way, money is not going anywhere anytime soon. Stop asking me. So anyways, by basically this, for the first time in history, this creates a paradigm where citizens, where humans, where ordinary people are in control of the currency. And so by keeping the government out, that's actually going to reduce the market distortions that Federal Reserves and those other kinds of things happen. So we are seeing the very first step in a major overhaul of all democratic institutions with this executive order. Mark my words, history will record this executive order and everything that happens as the start of a complete, absolute democratic renaissance. I am not exaggerating. Now, let's talk about creative destruction. So creative destruction is the process by which one new paradigm or technology replaces the old wholesale. So, cars replacing horses, that's a good one. Streaming replacing cable, that's another example. So what we're seeing right now is the government getting fully aligned with the idea of creative destruction. This is actually a really big reason why I'm glad that the DNC is not in power right now. Even though I am a progressive, I'm not a liberal, I'm a progressive. And what I'm pointing out here is that Trump's administration is far more progressive than the DNC was, at least in this respect. Now, what I mean by that is that the Democratic Party would have focused a lot more on maintaining the status quo. They have become the party of stagnation, of paralysis, and economic and technological status quo, which basically means, this other company, these special interest groups say, we don't really want AI like the longshoremen strike, because the Democrats are all pro-unions, and so the unions say, well, we don't want AI because it's going to destroy our jobs, and the Trump administration comes in like a wrecking ball saying, that's the point. Like, that is exactly the plan. Okay, so, the tone shift has been, like, I don't know why people aren't talking about how dramatically different the tone shift is from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. And by the way, I've liked a lot of things that both have done. I'm not, team blue or team red. I'm just like, okay, you've done some things that I like. You've done some things that I've liked. You've done some boneheaded things, and you've done some boneheaded things. Moving on. Now, let's talk about, end of culture wars. So this is another thing that's going to be very controversial. And you might be thinking Dave, why is this in an AI slide deck? So let me explain why this is in an AI slide deck. And that is because this tone shift about saying maybe the government shouldn't be mandating, ideological stuff here and there and artificial intelligence and crypto and blah, 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 blah. That is the opposite tack that China is taking. And that is the reason I included this is because this has a larger signaling as to okay, business first, innovation first, national power first. This is a sovereignty first policy. Because, and the reason I included this is because someone pointed out on the internet that basically America has been distracted by culture wars. The old way of doing things is you have the real policy that's going on, and then you have a smoke and mirrors, dog and pony show of, oh, but what about LGBT rights? What about marriage equality? And blah, 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 blah. And so you end up with these social issues playing front and center while the real stuff happens behind the scenes. And the Trump administration just doesn't care for all those dog and pony shows because it's like, guys, we actually have to build. If we're going to keep up with China, if we're going to stay ahead of China, we actually have to build, which leads to this slide. So, if you read the book, Tragedy of Great Power Politics, everything that's happening is making sense. Oh, by the way, also, I highly recommend Why Nations Fail. Okay, so Tragedy of Great Power Politics, everything that you see the Trump administration doing, basically they read Why Nations Fail and Tragedy of Great Power Politics, and they're abiding by what these books recommend basically to the letter. So there's a lot that's going on. So number one, just investment, that alignment of private investment and public policy to say we need to catch up. We need to do really well. So China is on the ascendancy with things like electric vehicles and robots and that and other kind of stuff. So we need to match them, move for move, play for play, and we are going to have to do better than them, which means we've been very lazy, we've been very entitled, we've been very stagnant for the last couple decades. Trust me, I've been in the technology space. My IT career started in 2007, and I switched to AI in 2019, 2020. Like we've been kind of asleep at the wheel. Like there's no reason that Google should not have gone all in on attention is all you need. But they released that paper and then nothing happened. Google released that paper and then nothing happened because they were just too afraid, too calcified, too paranoid, and they're still playing catch up. And we need to not fall behind any further than we have in terms of like overhauling our can-do attitude. We are the nation that made the movie The Right Stuff. Are we the right stuff or not? So this level of competition between great powers, as also the competition between like Elon Musk and Sam Altman. People ask me like, Dave, are you team Sam Altman or team Elon Musk? I'm team competition. I'm team grand struggle. That's where innovation happens. And also, by pointing out that this need for innovation is causing deregulation of both AI and cryptocurrency, that is going to lead to a democratic operating system overhaul. So what do I mean by democratic operating system overhaul? I need to come up with a better catchphrase for this. Basically, we're heading for cognitive hyperabundance. I've already made videos about that, just cognitive hyperabundance. It's pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. Intelligence too cheap to meter, artificial superintelligence with an IQ of 180. That's coming within about 2 years, if I had to guess. 2, maybe 3 years, we'll see. So human intelligence is not going to be a constraint on anything that we're doing. Robots are going to fill in the gaps for labor that people don't want to do. Then you've got blockchain and crypto coming in. That means decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. That means you have digital consensus. That means that you have radical transparency of property rights. All of this is coming, and all of this is now inevitable because of what has happened with the administration. So whatever else is true from a technology and democratic perspective, like in the long run, we have basically secured American geopolitical dominance for the next 50 years. Now, just because we have started the race doesn't mean that we've automatically won the race. There are still things that we could do wrong to derail this, but everything that I'm seeing right now is aligning for going in the right direction. Now, in the very long term, this will lead to what I call a civilizational operating system upgrade, a COS. I've been writing about this on Substack and Twitter, by the way. So, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, robotics, all of these things are going to do a lot to really shrink the world, even more so than the internet already has. And what I mean by shrink the world is borders are going to make less and less sense, which is why, talks about, integrating Canada into America. I'm like, you know what? That kind of makes sense. We share a continent. You might as well consolidate the whole continent. And we have a lot of cultural affinity for Canada anyways. Like Canada, we love Canadians. Canadians, well, I think they think that we're noisy. Anyways, like that border does not serve any economic purpose anymore. And so when you say, okay, well, if we want to consolidate geopolitical power and economic power, it kind of makes sense to have fewer borders, which is why the European Union was a good idea, because that allows for more economic cooperation on most of a continent. Now, again, Europe has an example of overregulation is what Europe has proven that you can do wrong. So eroding borders in the long run is going to happen. We need to evolve from neoliberalism to post-labor economics, which is one thing that I'm working on. So basically, capitalism and democracy are the operating system of civilization right now. Capitalism needs to evolve from neoliberalism to post-labor economics, and representative democracy needs to evolve to blockchain democracy or algorithmic democracy. Now, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Cheers.